Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called To Finding Out, written by PerilousPlatypus. Jura La Tetha had heard of humans. Everyone had. There was a whole section devoted to them in the 8th year curriculum about the end of the Gatekeeper Dominion. It was very exciting stuff, at least to Jaru, which made him the exception. Most everyone was bored, largely on account of it all being ancient history. The humans had broke through the gates, gotten rid of the gatekeepers, dropped off the compendium, and then had immediately disappeared. Everyone else did the section, learned about the most important thing that had ever happened to Ruxian, and then promptly moved on without a care. Not Jaru. Humanity stuck with him, ate at him, consumed him. It was all too crazy when you really thought about it, and Jaru did a lot of thinking about it. For example, why go to all of the trouble of kicking the gatekeepers out if you weren't going to control the gates yourself? Why not stick around and take everything over and become new gods? Why give so many gifts and knowledge and understanding and stuff to the people here? Why hide the gates that led to where they were from? That last question was one that really bothered him. It was infuriating. Why not just leave a map in the compendium? It made no sense. But he was still really happy they had come, even if they had left so many questions behind. Everything had changed because of the humans. People in Ruxian didn't even have electricity when the humans had come, and then boom! There it was. And things kept building on other things, all as this laid out within the compendium. There was so much progress so quickly. Ruxian historians called it the Bright Era, mostly on account of all the light Jaru supposed. Of course, it caused a lot of problems too, which Jaru didn't blame the humans for, but it still messed everything up for a while. The mages were not big fans of the compendium or technology in general. They saw it as a violation of natural order and profane. At one point, the Supreme Magikai had even called for the return of the old gods to banish the compendium and the heresy of technology along with it. That was the start of the Dark Wars. Totally crazy time there. Jaru always appreciated the light and dark stories, but he was pretty glad he hadn't lived during all of that. It sounded pretty awful. He was also pretty glad that the mages hadn't won, even though he had the spark of magic himself. Everything seemed to be a lot better with technology, particularly because, unlike magic, it was something everybody could use. All the statistics backed it up. People lived longer and healthier lives because of the knowledge in the compendium. The mages were just sour that they didn't get to lord over everyone all of the time. They wanted to keep everyone in the dark. Dark Walls, good name. Every switch day, Jaru gave a prayer thanking the humans, even though there weren't any gods anymore. It still felt like the right thing to do. He owed his whole life to those peculiar visitors, and he didn't want it to seem like he was taking them for granted. Without them, he'd probably be a house wizard somewhere, indentured until he was almost dead to pay off the cost of his schooling. It sounded horrible, and he was happy he didn't have to do it. All because of the humans. He'd find them and he'd tell them how much they'd helped. But first, he had to finish Farcaster School and then get a commission, and then an elbow jabbed into his side, disturbing his very important plans for the future. Annoyed, he turned in his chair, prepared to let them know as much. He stopped, the cutting remark dying in his mouth as he watched Lorcia LaRussa settling into the chair beside him. Loreka was cool. She was also very much his best friend and was afforded certain privileges as a result. This included the occasional plan-destroying elbow ribbing. "The gates have opened," Loreka chirped at him, arcing a finger of both of her hands together to form a circle. "And we shall go," Jaru replied, punching the fist through the circle. Her fingers broke apart and she splayed her fingers outwards, wriggling them. It was wildly inappropriate and also their very favorite thing to do. "You chasing your dreams again?" she asked, as she began to pull things from her satchel. She placed a console close to his, and a few mana potions along the side. The stopper of one had been removed and replaced haphazardly, the contents of the potion already half consumed. Loreka consumed mana just about faster than anyone Giroux had ever seen. It was uncanny, also impressive. Also, the reason why she had to scurry off to the bathroom every other minute. He was in a very serious contemplation of very serious matters, Giroux intoned, his face in a broad grimace. Thinking about your commission? Jera giggled. Yeah, thinking about my commission. We'll get a scout ship, and we've got the marks for it and the references. Loreka was always so sure, so certain. Giroux wished that he had her confidence. But then he suspected he wouldn't work as hard, which he definitely couldn't afford to do. This was everything. One screw-up, and he'd be forecasting a known branch mining barge. He blanched. It was a fate worse than death. He'd rather be a house wizard. Not really. Anything in space was better than staying on Ruxian. Being a forecaster was better than being anything else. But still, a known branch mining barge sounded pretty horrible. I still wish I knew what Haru was going to ask. His exam has been a... Haru trailed off, looking for the right word. Nightmare distilled into some cruel form of written torture, Loreka offered helpfully. Yeah, that. 7 years past, he asked for a gate branch map 6 orders deep. You didn't even get to pick a second link. All 11. Giroux rewarded her with a snort. Might as well have asked for the pathing to Earth, Giroux said, setting the hook. How many links do you think it is? Loreka replied, adding the bait. Giroux gobbled the bait immediately, happy to be reeled in. This was a favorite topic, and Giroux leaned back in his chair, pushing it onto its hind legs. He took a sip of mana, contemplating the question. Every time it was asked, he took care to reconsider it fully in light of whatever he had learned since the last time it was asked. Given all of this recent preparation for the exam in Professor Haru's theories of forecasting advanced seminar, that was quite a bit. Not that any of it helped that much, but if he was going to dedicate his life to it, he was determined to make every bit count. Well, we know that 7 of 11 seconds links are fully mapped. Loreka nodded. Fully mapped. 2 of the 7 without evidence of human intervention. Right. 2 of the 7 have no trace other than the gate being open. Open meant unguarded, which was an important distinction. There were still some gates in the links that still had gods guarding them. When they were discovered, a warning went out and the entire system was avoided. No one wanted to attract the attention of the gatekeepers. That did mean that the branch remained unexplored. Giroux took some exception to the term fully mapped being applied to branches with a guarded gate, but he wasn't in a position to change forecaster policy yet. Which is interesting to consider whether the gates were abandoned. Stop stalling, Loreka cut in. They couldn't afford to go too deep into the tangents. Interesting as they were, they'd be here all night, and there was still studying to do. Of the 4 that aren't mapped, 2 have an early link that's still guarded, so we can probably discount the humans being there, Giroux continued, unwilling to be goaded into an early guess. Though I have some concerns that the gatekeepers might have regained control of the gate guarding the human branch, but there's nothing we can do about that. It's also not very likely. We've only seen 3 gates where it appears gatekeepers have managed to get control again. Agreed, not likely, but still not an impossibility. If anything, it is more likely that the gatekeepers would try to block the main path. To bottle them up like mana, Giroux took another sip of the potion to emphasize the point, enjoying the warmth as it circulated throughout his body, sharpening his senses. He had to be more sparing with his gulps than Loreka. He was on a scholarship, and his family was far too poor to afford potions shipping from home. But I agree it is unlikely. That leaves the other paths. They've got a pretty big range of mapping. 14 down in Sul is, 8 down in Yacht is, 6 down in Ima is. Only 1 down in Uli is, Loreka said, a glimmer in her eyes. Giroux did not miss the glimmer and added a glint to his own. Too much destruction there. Debris everywhere, very messy. Can't make progress there. The new scouts might be able to make it. Maybe. Deep Eyes have the in-ruined armor, but everything says Uli is a dangerous branch. Not with the dive when there are clearer routes, Giroux said, the glint in his eye magnified by at least 200%. Or at least Giroux hoped it did. That is exactly what makes it worth it, Loreka exclaimed, leaning back on her chair as well. Maybe that's where the gatekeepers made their stand. Maybe it's all messed up because that's the spot where they tried to stop humanity from popping their stopper and spraying mana-y goodness all over the place. Loreka yanked the stopper out of her half-consumed mana bottle and drained it completely, giving a self-satisfied smack of the lips before looking down at the empty bottle. She became contemplative now. The volume of her voice dropped accordingly. And then, once the mana had escaped, it just disappeared. I'm pretty sure you're going to see it again in about 15 minutes, Giroux replied, cackling. Loreka flushed, the delicate pink rising up her cheeks. That doesn't count, but I agree. They're probably down Ula is. But how far down? Giroux offered her a broad grin now. I guess we'll have to find out. He raised his potion towards her, and she took the opportunity to open up a second, clinking the bottle against his. To finding out, Giroux repeated. They both took a sip, Loreka longer than Giroux's. Suddenly, Loreka let the chairs land on all fours. If you'll excuse me, I need to. Giroux waved her away. Yeah, I know, I'll watch your stuff. Thanks, she said, before hopping up and prancing away. Giroux took a moment to watch her, wondering how she ever expected to pilot from a Farcaster chair if she needed to hop up to relieve her bladder every time she sat down. Probably because everyone wanted her in that chair. She was the best, a true natural, magic and brains to spare. The math came easy and the feel came easier. Loreka was born to be in that chair. They'd probably just installed a toilet in the chair to make sure that she ended up there. He sighed and then turned back to his console, his nerves already creeping up. If he wanted to be in the chair beside her, Giroux had a lot of work to do. Any shortage in his own talent he needed to make up for in preparation. He needed to be ready for anything, even Professor Harlu, who was probably scheming his new torture even now in his office, cackling madly as he scribbled arcane equations and fantasized about all the futures that he would destroy with them. Well, Jarlu wouldn't be one of them. He'd come too far. He wouldn't stop until he found humanity. It was his destiny. He was sure of it. To finding out, Jarlu whispered, his eyes fixated on the console in front of him. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.